In this video, I'll be walking you through how we are currently scaling our operations to 1 million outbound emails per month, and specifically also the four constraints that we actually ran into and how we solved each one of them. What we do, just for your context and why you should listen to us, essentially in the first place, we have combined two core acquisition channels into one for to help B2B companies, our portfolio of B2B companies, scale their sales pipeline consistently. We've combined warm calls with cold email and outbound email in particular to actually be able to essentially form it into one acquisition channel that consistently generates qualified sales pipeline and SQLs for our B2B clients. That way, we've actually sent millions of outbound emails across our portfolio of B2B clients that are all actually personalized using obviously AI, Cloud Code, and all of them relevant at scale, obviously. Also, next to obviously the outbound emails, especially our client BDRs, have made more than 150,000 outbound call based, both cold calls and warm calls based touch points now with prospects of our B2B clients, but also internally, for example, to actually be able to not just generate leads mostly through the emails, but actually be able to convert them into qualified sales appointments. And one of the main things about our experience in particular is we haven't just been focusing on like one specific industry, but multiple different industries, multiple different verticals and sectors, including B2B logistics, so third party logistics providers, CNC machining, so B2B manufacturers, marketing agencies, so mostly direct to consumer email marketing agencies, a lot of different other industries, including, for example, recruiting agencies, so a lot of different industries, and in those industries, what we've found, and specifically the knowledge that we acquired, is which messaging angles work for which targeting angles, which front end offers are the best, which sub ICPs to focus on specifically, and that way we've simply essentially used all of that data, all of that knowledge essentially inside of Cloud Code. We essentially use Cloud Code now as our like full time go to marketer orchestration layer, which simply helps us craft profitable outbound campaigns at scale. And at this volume, just so you understand, the core difference when it comes to opinions and actual numbers is data. And at this point, we actually have the data to be able to actually have numbers and not just opinions. So we can actually form real opinions backed by real data. So the four constraints I'm going to walk you through that we've been solving in the last couple of months essentially were warm calling all positive replies and hiring the right people to actually make these calls. The automated lead pipeline, because specifically lead list building is one of the highest leverage processes, but also can be very time intensive, especially for example you're still using like generic databases like Apollo or Zoom Info, for example, or Cognizant. Then the data problem specifically. So when you're obviously sending across this many clients, across so many campaigns, so many different front end offers, when you're sending all of these different essentially emails across these different campaigns, what will happen is you will acquire a lot of data, but then you'll actually need to be able to essentially interpret and analyze that data to actually use it to the best of our abilities, and in a profitable manner to be able to create other outbound campaigns at scale as well. The mental model also, this is kind of the fourth constraint. And what we're seeing in general with the outbound, specifically the email outbound market, is it's getting closer and more similar to how paid ads specifically is scaled essentially. When it comes to warm calling all positive replies, specifically what I mean by warm calling is actually calling positive replies. So for example, let's just say a lead replies positively to an email, um, and specifically calling in the first 5 minutes at the moment of intent, because intent actually can decay by the hour, not by the day. So there was actually a study that's it's very well known. A lot of people have been talking about it. Like if you actually call them like the first 5 minutes, you have like a, I don't know, 5x 10x better chance of actually them converting into a closed deal compared to like in 24 hours, for example. What we do across our B2B clients is we warm call every positive reply. Either they have like an internal BDR, or we use one of our SDRs or BDRs to actually call them specifically. And ideally we do that not necessarily just same day, but actually like within, as I said, those either the first hour would be still decent, but what would be best is actually in those first 5 minutes of them actually replying. And specifically when it comes to the warm call, its job is not only to like book a qualified meeting for you, but it's to actually qualify whether they are a qualified lead. So what we do is we don't just generate leads for our clients, for example. What we do is we generate sales qualified meetings because we actually qualify them and understand, are they highly similar to your best close one deals, to your ideal customer profile. And what you need to understand when hiring those people, those SDRs or BDRs, specifically for this role, is you should not use a commission only approach. Simply doesn't work well. Same way, for example, when you work with a commission only agency, you obviously already know. Um, it's most likely going to be you'll churn out, like their leads are not going to be qualified. And specifically when it comes to callers, it's often high churn. Knowledge actually never compounds. You simply always have to be rotating new SDRs, and simply is not going to get you the results that you're looking for. What we see in terms of comp structure is a monthly seller plus pay per showed meeting. What we see is that that specifically gets you the best possible results because they actually stick with you. And we've had SDRs and BDRs that have been with us for 6 to 12 months now. And on average, like in this market specifically, it's typically like a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks when you're doing commission only. So be aware of that specifically. When it comes to the onboarding processes that we've used for that specifically is actually showing them recordings of good calls that actually booked, that were actually qualified, and simply having them adhere to the script as strictly as possible. So strict adherence to the script is very important because otherwise you're simply not able to iterate on the messaging, test new angles, A/B test it. Um, consistently because they're like actually just saying whatever, like they're saying different things on every call, so you don't know what specific variable actually affected this one call to actually get a good outcome versus this other call get a bad outcome. When it comes to our automated lead pipeline, we've actually built an internal tool to handle this specific problem of ours because the main problem that we had, we were acquiring so much data across our clients, across all of that specifically, um, that we had to build this internal tool to actually be able to interpret and analyze all of the data. Because what we noticed is that when we, for example, like at scale, like analyzing all of the data manually, is simply difficult, and actually using it to like manually create better campaigns afterwards. Or let's just say like one specific campaign performs really well, one does perform really well. Now what we do specifically is we have Cloud Code specifically use those campaign results, like pull those campaign analytics, and then actually be able to interpret why this campaign worked, why this didn't work, and then actually use it for the next campaigns. For this specifically, also another core issue has been actually the lead list building. Specifically, what we've seen is, and this is one of the core issues, because you can have the infrastructure to be able to send millions of emails a month essentially, but if you're not able to actually have right leads that are actually in your ICP or very close to ideal clients, ideal prospects, you're simply not going to see any good results. So what we've done is we've actually used specific Blitz API, and we've seen that is a very good unlimited leads tool, essentially one of the best from what we've seen. Is we've connected that specific API key to Cloud Code and then to Smartly to actually be able to upload those leads directly into new Smart Lead campaigns. And now we've combined those two aspects of it, and what that essentially does, it analyzes which results are performing, which results are not performing, also across different offer tiers. So one offer, obviously, if it's more saturated, it's more mass market, it's going to get worse results. That's completely normal. And obviously, the Cloud Code system essentially also essentially uses that to actually analyze it, and then it actually scales the campaigns that work and kills the campaigns that do not actually produce the results. And the unlock is really that narrow targeting actually stays survivable at volume, because what we see across the board is when you actually scale using not necessarily a system like Cloud Code or the automated lead pipeline, you're going to get broader and broader targeting. So naturally, your email to lead ratio is going to decay, and you're going to get significantly worse results. When it comes to the data problem, as I already said, that's also what I was talking about earlier as well. Um, what we do, as I said, we test dozens of concurrent hypotheses, and no human can actually process all of that data and then actually use it for next campaigns. So the internal tool we build in Cloud Code is we have it flag underperforming campaigns immediately, replace them, stop them, and pause them, and it scales campaigns with a high ROCAS. That's what we call it, a return on cold email spend. It's very similar to a return on ad spend. So you've probably heard about that, like in Meta ads, for example, paid ads, Google ads as well, but for outbound, and it's simply so important because what we've seen with outbound specifically is a lot of people don't actually track necessarily the actual like return on the spend of cold email infrastructure, for example, but more so the number of meetings or the qualified meetings. But at the end of the day, obviously, what it comes down to is that ROI. So that's really what we've changed now, specifically, and what we are seeing. I'm also going to dive into this later as well. Is outbound is simply becoming more and more similar to paid ads in that specific sense. And what we see across the board is what we do differently compared to like a lot of other agencies is we go very broad first and then very narrow. So we test a lot of different hypotheses, different front end offers, different messaging targeting angles, and then we narrow down to what actually produces the results. Yeah, as I said, outbound is becoming more and more like paid ads. So obviously with paid ads you have to test a lot of different pieces of creative, a lot of different A/B tests when it comes to your landing page, and simply the same is happening with email. Simply now because you're able to scale to these high volumes of emails, you're simply to do so many different tests, which is great in the sense that um, we're actually able to see which of these campaigns work, which of these campaigns do not work, and then actually use that market intelligence. So we test dozens, hundreds of hypotheses per client. So when it comes to targeting, messaging, the front end offer, and specifically, the way we approach it is we use a small budget. We allocate a small budget on many experiments first, as I said, broad, and then we use real budget only on proven winners. So then essentially we narrow it down to the winners to actually scale them. As I said, we scale the winners across the entirety of the TAM of that specific sub ICP. That's very effective. So when we're testing, say for one sub ICP, 5 to 10 campaigns, then we're going to narrow it down to the one campaign that works, scale it across the entire TAM, and we can even send those specific winning emails to people that we've already emailed with a different one that actually didn't produce results as well. Now, you might be specifically thinking like it doesn't work in your specific market. Um, Now the main question, like the way we actually approach it is, let's just say you've never run like outbound in the past. What we do when we actually work together is we actually like analyze and actually be able to create like a lot of different hypotheses and a lot of different campaigns, a lot of different offers, and then we're actually able to go very broad and then scale what actually works for your specific market. Because simply obviously saying like doesn't work at your market, like it's pretty simple. Like if you're looking for a fractional CRO to help and you're getting a very valuable email with a low friction ask, good front end offers, the website has a lot of testimonials, and maybe even on social media they're pretty active, obviously you're going to reply. So like outbound in general works in every market. Like they take Salesforce, Amazon, Google, all of these companies use outbound in their sales and acquisition approach in general. And nowadays, the mode is not necessarily being able to send emails, but the testing velocity is the mode. And it simply rewards the people who start early and who actually test and are willing to test a lot of different approaches, a lot of different campaigns. And that's simply what we're able to do now with our Cloud Code campaign intelligence system specifically. So if you want us to implement the same process, the same outbound go to market approach for your company, you can simply book a call below.